A retired Navy SEAL was driving to empty his late sister's house when a bark stopped him beside a snowbound road. Beneath an old oak, a chained German shepherd mother stood between the winter cold and her frightened puppy. The puppy could have run toward the nearest homes, but kept carrying dry leaves back to the mother. The man believed cutting one chain would end the trouble waiting for him on that hill. Instead, an old brass bell connected Owen to his sister's unfinished work and neighbors afraid of losing their independence. Before winter closed the roads, Owen would have to learn that helping people is not the same as controlling them. Where are you watching from today? Stay to the end. Share what this story means to you, and please like and subscribe as we work toward our first 1,000 subscribers. Owen Carver had been back in Bellwether for less than 20 minutes when the road gave him a reason to stop. He was driving his late sister's pickup toward Maple Hill, moving slowly because ice had formed in the shaded turns. The tires made a low, careful crunch over packed snow. Beyond the windshield, the small mountain town rested beneath a pale blue sky, its roofs white, its fences half buried, its church steeple rising above the bare trees. It was a bright winter morning, beautiful even. Owen did not mistake beauty for welcome. 3 months had passed since his older sister, Lillian Carver, had died. As her only surviving relative, Owen had inherited the house, the barn, the aging pickup, and every unfinished decision she had left behind. He was also the executor of her will, which meant the next 10 days had already been arranged in his mind. Inspect the property, sort the papers, hire someone to clear the house, list it for sale, leave. At 53, after nearly 3 decades connected to the Navy and years spent living quietly afterward, Owen believed a man should eventually learn to travel lighter. No new promises. No one depending on him. No more waking each morning responsible for whether another person made it safely through the day. He had carried enough. The pickup rounded a bend where the road narrowed between a low stone wall and an old stand of oaks. Owen eased off the accelerator. That was when he heard the sound. One rough bark. Not loud. Not repeated. It came from somewhere beyond the snowbank on the passenger side. Owen drove another 15 feet before stopping. He left the engine running and listened. Nothing. Wind moved through the bare branches. Meltwater ticked beneath a skin of ice along the ditch. Somewhere farther down the hill, a shovel scraped against a porch step. Then came a second sound. A low growl, strained and uneven. Owen shifted the pickup into park. "This is not part of the schedule," he said. The empty cab offered no argument. He pulled on his canvas jacket and stepped outside. At 6'2", with broad shoulders and the restrained posture of a man who had spent years making himself smaller in uncertain rooms, Owen looked more suited to the road than to the legal papers waiting at the house. His ash-brown hair was short, silver showing clearly at both temples. A thick salt and pepper stubble covered his jaw. Beneath the jacket, he wore a faded green camouflage shirt, matching field trousers, and dark brown military boots. The clothes were practical. That was the only explanation he gave himself. Owen climbed over the packed edge of the road and moved toward the sound. He did not rush. The snow beside the ditch had been disturbed by something small. Several sets of uneven paw prints crossed and recrossed the same narrow patch. A large oak stood 10 yards beyond the road. At first, Owen saw only the chain. It ran from the trunk into a shallow hollow beneath the branches. Dirty ice clung to the metal links. Then the dog rose. She was a female German shepherd, perhaps 6 years old, yellow and black beneath the snow gathered across her back. She was too thin. Not skeletal, but worn down enough that the shape of her ribs showed when she breathed. The fur around her neck had been rubbed flat and raw from pulling against the chain. Still, she placed herself between Owen and something behind her, Her head lowered. Her dark muzzle tightened. The growl came again. Owen stopped. "All right," he said quietly. "I see you." The shepherd's eyes did not leave his hands. Owen had worked around trained dogs before, enough to know that confidence and trust were not the same thing. A frightened dog did not need a man proving he was fearless. She needed him to become predictable. He turned slightly sideways and let his arms hang loose. Only then did he see the puppy. The little German shepherd stood behind the mother's hind leg, trembling so hard that its oversized paws shifted in the dead leaves. It was young, 10 weeks perhaps. One ear stood upright while the other folded toward its face. The puppy was not chained. Owen looked toward the road. Nothing blocked the pup's escape. It could have slipped through the roots, crossed the shallow ditch, and followed the slope toward the nearest houses. But it had stayed. As Owen watched, the puppy bent down, picked up a mouthful of dry oak leaves, and carried them to the mother. It dropped them near her belly, pawed at the small pile, then pressed its body against her front leg. The mother never looked away from Owen. The puppy never moved away from her. Something shifted inside him. Not dramatically, not enough to deserve a name. It was simply the recognition of a choice. The little dog had no strength to free its mother, no understanding of chains or roads, or how far help might be. Staying was the only thing it could offer. So it stayed. Owen had known men who spoke loudly about loyalty and disappeared when loyalty became inconvenient. This small creature had no speech to make. It only laid its warmth beside the one who could not leave. Maybe God measured faithfulness that way, Owen thought. Not by how much power a soul possessed, but by what it refused to abandon. He lowered his duffel bag into the snow. The zipper gave a faint metallic click. The mother lunged half a step and the chain snapped tight. The puppy flinched, but did not run. Owen froze. Easy. The shepherd's breath came fast through her nose. She kept one shoulder angled over the pup. Her legs trembled, partly from cold and partly from the effort of remaining upright. Owen slowly lowered himself to one knee, leaving several yards between them. He did not stare into her eyes. He watched her posture, the pull of the chain, the distance to the tree. The chain had been looped around the trunk and secured with a small padlock. It was short enough to prevent the shepherd from reaching the road, and short enough that she could not shelter fully beneath the lowest branches. Whoever had put her there had expected to return, or had wanted someone else to believe that. Owen pushed the thought aside. Anger was easy. Anger gave a man somewhere to stand. The dog needed something more useful. He opened the side pocket of his duffel and removed a pair of compact bolt cutters. The mother's growl deepened. Owen set the cutters on the snow where she could see them. "I'm not touching your neck." Her ears moved slightly. He waited. Minutes passed. Cold crept through the knee of his trousers. The pickup engine idled behind him, a soft mechanical hum beneath the winter silence. The puppy lifted its nose and sniffed toward Owen. It took one hesitant step out from behind its mother. The shepherd shifted instantly, blocking it. The movement cost her. Her front legs nearly folded before she caught herself. Owen felt his jaw tighten. "All right," he murmured. "We do this your way." He moved in a shallow arc rather than walking directly toward her. Each time the mother stiffened, he stopped. Each time her breathing eased, he moved another few inches. The puppy watched everything. When Owen came within reach of the tree, the shepherd bared her teeth. She was close enough now that he could see melting snow caught in her whiskers. He kept his left hand open and low. With his right, he lifted the cutters. The chain lay against the bark behind the dog, away from her collar. Owen positioned the jaws around one link. Metal pressed against metal. The puppy gave a tiny sound. The mother turned her head for less than a second. In that instant, Owen saw the full truth of her fear. She believed that looking away from him might cost her the puppy. "No," he said softly. "Nothing is taking your little one." He squeezed. The first attempt failed. Cold had made the link stubborn. The mother swung her gaze back to him. Owen adjusted the cutters and tried again. The chain broke with a sharp crack. The loose end dropped into the snow. The shepherd jumped sideways, then stopped. Freedom did not send her running. It seemed to confuse her. For several seconds, she stood perfectly still, the broken chain trailing from her collar. Then she turned and pressed her muzzle against the puppy's face. She licked once across its eyes, then again along its ear, as though confirming that the little body was still there. Owen remained beside the tree. He had seen relief arrive in many forms. Sometimes people laughed. Sometimes they collapsed. Sometimes they became angry because anger felt safer than gratitude. The dog simply counted her young one back into the world. Owen clipped the remaining length of chain away from the collar without touching the sore skin beneath it. Then he backed off and removed his jacket. The mother followed every movement. He spread the jacket on the snow between them. The puppy stepped onto it first. Its legs gave way almost immediately. The mother moved forward, ready to intervene, but Owen had already lowered both hands. "You come too," he said. "No one is separating you." The words left his mouth before he considered them. "No one is separating you." He had said similar things in other places, to frightened people in rooms far from home. Promises made under pressure could become heavy. Owen knew that better than most. Yet some promises did not feel like chains. Some were the first tool used to cut one. He lifted the puppy inside the folded jacket. It weighed almost nothing. The little dog did not struggle. It placed its nose against the fabric and looked toward its mother. The shepherd took one step after them, then another. Owen carried the pup to the pickup and opened the rear passenger door. He placed the bundled dog on the floor behind the front seat, where the cab's warmth had begun to gather. The mother remained outside. Owen did not reach for her. He stood beside the open door and waited. At last, she climbed in, stiff and cautious, and positioned herself over the puppy. Her body still shook, but she no longer growled. Owen shut the door gently. As he turned back toward his duffel, the puppy began scratching against the glass. What now? He followed its gaze toward the oak. Something lay half buried beside the roots. Owen returned and found a short piece of weathered cord. A small brass bell was tied to one end. It was dull with age, no larger than the center of his palm. The puppy had dragged the cord through the leaves before the cold had weakened it. Owen brushed away the snow. 2 letters had been engraved into the bell. L.C. He stood beneath the old oak with the bell resting in his gloved hand. Lillian Carver. The initials were simple. There was no mistaking them. Behind him, the puppy scratched once more at the window. The mother watched from inside the truck, her body curved around the little dog. Owen looked up the road toward Maple Hill, where his sister's empty house waited to be inventoried, cleared, and sold. 10 days, he had told himself. No new promises. No one depending on him. The bell gave a small sound as the wind moved it against his fingers. Owen picked up his duffel and walked back to the pickup. For the first time that morning, his plan no longer felt complete. The veterinary clinic in Bellwether opened at 8, but Owen Carver was waiting in the parking lot 12 minutes early. The female German shepherd lay across the back seat of Lillian's pickup, her body curved around the puppy. She had allowed Owen to drive them away from the oak, but she had not relaxed. Each time the truck slowed, her head rose. Each time Owen glanced into the mirror, her dark eyes were already watching him. The puppy slept beneath Owen's canvas jacket. One oversized paw rested against the mother's chest. The brass bell lay on the passenger seat. Owen had placed it there carefully, though he could not have explained why. The initials engraved into its worn surface, Elsant, faced upward. Lillian Carver. His sister had been dead for 3 months, yet one small object had made the morning feel as though she had left a question beside the road and expected him to pick it up. A light came on inside the clinic. A woman crossed the waiting room, unlocked the glass door, and looked toward the truck. She did not wave. She simply opened the door wider and held it. Owen stepped out. The woman waiting inside was Dr. Ruth Delaney, Bellwether's veterinarian. She was 59, lean and straight-backed, with chestnut brown hair threaded heavily with silver and tied low at her neck. She wore slate blue scrubs beneath a gray coat. Thin reading glasses rested on top of her head. "You called about 2 shepherds?" she asked. "1 adult female, 1 puppy. Can the mother walk?" "Yes." "Will she let you touch her?" "No." Ruth nodded, as though that were useful information rather than an inconvenience. "Then we won't begin by touching her." Owen respected her before he had crossed the doorway. Ruth led him through a side entrance into a quiet examination room with rubber flooring and no metal table in the center. She lowered the lights, brought in 2 folded blankets, and left the door open. Owen returned to the truck. The mother came out only after he stepped back. She jumped carefully to the ground, then turned at once toward the puppy. Owen lifted the small dog in the jacket. The mother followed him into the clinic, staying close enough to see the bundle, but far enough that he could not reach her collar. Inside the room, the shepherd inspected the corners, the open doorway, Ruth's medical bag, and Owen's hands. Only then did she lie beside the puppy. Ruth sat on the floor several feet away. "No baby talk," Owen said. Ruth looked at him. "Were you expecting some? Most people do it with frightened animals. Most people talk too much when they're nervous." She removed a handheld scanner from her bag and set it on the floor, where the dog could see it. For the next several minutes, Ruth did almost nothing. She watched the shepherd breathe. She studied how the dog carried her weight, how often she swallowed, and how quickly her eyes followed movement. She slid a shallow bowl of water across the floor, then turned her face away. The dog did not drink. The puppy did. It crawled from the jacket, placed both front paws in the bowl, and pushed its nose so deeply into the water that it sneezed. Ruth's mouth moved slightly. "Good lungs," she said. The mother leaned forward, smelled the water, then drank in small, controlled pulls. Owen remained beside the wall. He had spent much of his life believing that useful people moved first. Ruth seemed to understand another kind of usefulness, the discipline to wait until help could be accepted. When the shepherd finally allowed the scanner near her shoulder, the device gave a quiet beep. Ruth read the number, then entered it into the clinic computer. Her expression changed, not dramatically, just enough for Owen to notice. "What is it?" Ruth looked back at the dog. "Her name is Mara." The shepherd's right ear lifted. Ruth said it again, more softly. "Mara." This time, the dog turned her head. Recognition passed through the room without spectacle. No tail wagged. Mara did not cross the distance or offer trust she did not yet feel. But the name reached her. That was enough. Ruth pulled up the registration record. 6 years old. German Shepherd. Female. Trained through a local community search program. Police? No, nothing official like that. Ruth scrolled through the file. Your sister helped organize the program. Mara was trained to locate older adults who wandered from home, became disoriented on rural roads, or stopped responding during winter checks. Owen looked at the dog differently. Mara still appeared exhausted. Her golden black coat was wet and tangled. The fur around her neck had been rubbed thin. Yet beneath the fatigue was a stillness that now made sense. She did not react to every sound. She measured it. Lillian trained her? not alone. Your sister was good with people, roots, and persistence. Other people handled the technical work. Ruth glanced at him. Lillian rarely did anything alone, though she sometimes allowed people to think she did. That sounded like her. Ruth examined the puppy next. Mara did not permit distance between them, so Ruth worked on the floor within the mother's sight. The puppy had no microchip and no registration. About 10 weeks, Ruth said. Underfed since yesterday. Cold but alert. No sign of serious injury. The puppy attempted to chew the cord attached to the brass bell, which Owen had brought in with the jacket. Ruth rescued the cord before it disappeared into the small mouth. "What do you call him?" "I don't. That will make paperwork difficult. He isn't mine." The puppy hooked one paw through the cord and pulled. The bell rang once. Mara's head came up immediately. The puppy pulled again. A second, clear note filled the room. Ruth watched the exchange. "Bell," she said. Owen frowned. "That's not very imaginative. He has one upright ear, 2 large feet, and no respect for medical equipment. I don't think he'll suffer from an ordinary name." The puppy rang the bell a third time. Mara settled again. Ruth wrote Bell on the temporary patient form. The name stayed. While the dogs rested, Ruth began making calls. The first went to the number listed on Mara's registration. No one answered. The second reached a woman who had once volunteered with Lillian's winter roots. She knew that Mara had been placed with a man named Miles Fenner after Lillian's death. The third call reached the rehabilitation wing of a hospital outside Bellwether. Ruth's voice changed. "When?" She listened for nearly a minute. Was he able to speak? Another pause. Did anyone know he had dogs with him? Owen watched her face. When Ruth ended the call, she kept one hand on the receiver. "Miles Fenner had a mild stroke yesterday morning." Owen looked toward Mara. "He's alive?" "Yes. Stable. Limited speech for now, but expected to improve." "And the dogs?" No one knew. The room seemed to become quieter around that answer. Ruth found the remaining details through a snowplow driver, the county dispatch office, and the mechanic who had been called about Miles's truck. 3 months earlier, after Lillian died, Mara had been pregnant. Miles Fenner, a 68-year-old volunteer driver who had worked with Lillian for years, agreed to care for her until a permanent arrangement could be made. Belle had been born at Miles's house 10 weeks ago. The previous morning, Miles had tried to bring both dogs to Ruth's clinic for a routine check. His truck failed on the road below Maple Hill. Mara kept following when he tried to walk uphill for a phone signal, Ruth explained. He tied her under the oak to keep her away from the road. The snowbank blocked most of the wind. And Belle? Unrestrained. Miles expected to be gone a few minutes. Owen looked at the puppy. Belle had been free the entire time. He could have followed the road downhill. He could have reached a house. He could have disappeared into the woods. Instead, he had remained beside the chain. Ruth continued. Miles made it almost 2 miles before the stroke. A snowplow driver found him near the upper bend. He could not explain clearly. The ambulance approached from the opposite direction and never passed the truck. The dogs were behind the snowbank. And the oak. From the road, they would have been almost invisible. Owen's anger had been waiting since the moment he saw the chain. It had been simple then. Someone had done something cruel. Someone could be blamed. Now the facts refused to give him that comfort. Miles had not chosen to leave them through indifference. The emergency crew had not knowingly ignored them. Ruth had not failed to search for dogs she did not know were missing. No one person had decided that Mara and Belle did not matter. They had fallen into the space between one person's collapse and another person's incomplete knowledge. Owen had seen that kind of space before. Terrible things did not always require terrible people. Sometimes they needed only a broken vehicle, a failed phone signal, one frightened man unable to speak, and several decent people, each holding only one piece of the truth. A person could spend years asking why God permitted such gaps. Lillian would have asked a different question. Who noticed the gap, and what did they do next? Ruth returned to the dogs. She cleaned the irritated skin around Mara's neck without forcing her onto a table. Owen held a bowl of softened food several feet away while Ruth worked. Mara watched both of them but didn't resist. "The neck will heal," Ruth said. "She's dehydrated and exhausted. No serious damage that I can see. And Bell? Cold, hungry, and convinced everything belongs in his mouth. His chances are excellent." Bell was chewing Owen's jacket zipper. Owen removed it gently. "What happens now?" Ruth stood and folded her glasses into one hand. "They stay together. Mara is not ready for a shelter, and moving Bell away from her would make both of them worse. You keep animals here. Patients, not long-term boarders. I'm selling the house. Today? No. Tomorrow?" Owen said nothing. Ruth slipped her glasses into her coat pocket. 2 weeks, Mr. Carver." "Owen." 2 weeks, Owen. Warm room, small meals, quiet. No collar on Mara. Bring them back if she stops drinking, if Bell becomes weak, or if either of them has trouble breathing. I'm not adopting them. I didn't ask you to. You're asking me to become responsible for them." Ruth looked toward Mara and Bell. "No, they became your responsibility when you stopped the truck." The words were not accusing. That made them harder to dismiss. Ruth packed food, soft bandages, a temporary harness, and written instructions into a paper bag. Before Owen left, she handed him the brass bell. "Lillian used this on the porch," Ruth said. "For what?" "To let the drivers know a delivery was ready. Sometimes to call people inside for coffee. Toward the end, Mara learned to come when she heard it." Owen turned the bell in his palm. "So it belonged at the house?" "Yes." "Then how did it get to the oak?" Ruth looked at Bell, who was asleep with his head across Mara's front paw. "I don't know." By evening, the house on Maple Hill had warmth in only 3 rooms. Owen lit the old furnace, cleared dust from the kitchen table, and made a sleeping place for the dogs near the wall. Mara ate only when he turned his back. Bell ate as though someone might change the rules halfway through the bowl. Afterward, the puppy dragged the cord of the bell across the floor. The first ring woke Mara. Her head snapped up, her body tightened. Bell crawled against her chest. A few minutes later, Mara slept again. The bell rang a second time. This time, Mara lifted only one ear. By the 4th ring, Owen understood. Bell was not playing. Each time the mother stirred or began to breathe too quickly, the puppy pulled the cord. The sound reached Mara, and Bell pressed against her until she settled. It was not training. It was not magic. It was simply the small invention of a creature that had spent a cold night trying to keep its mother from slipping too far away. Owen took the bell before Bell could exhaust himself. He carried it into the kitchen and set it on the counter. The cord slid over the edge and struck a corkboard mounted beside the pantry. Several papers fell loose. Owen caught one before it reached the floor. It was a map of Bellwether and the roads surrounding Maple Hill. Lines in blue, red, and green connected isolated homes across the county. Beside the map were lists of medicine deliveries, firewood checks, radio calls, and weather notes. Lillian's handwriting covered the margins. Some names had been crossed out. Others had dates beside them. One name had been circled in red. Evelyn Pike. Beside it, Lillian had written, "Does not answer the phone when the roads freeze. Go in person." Owen read the sentence twice. Behind him, the bell rang softly as Bell pulled the cord from the other side of the doorway. Mara opened her eyes. The house no longer felt empty. It felt unfinished. The next morning, Owen Carver called Evelyn Pike 3 times. The first call rang until the line went quiet. The second ended in a burst of static. On the third, someone seemed to lift the receiver. Owen heard a faint scrape, then nothing. "Mrs. Pike?" No answer came. He stood in Lillian's kitchen with the old telephone pressed to his ear. On the corkboard beside him, Evelyn's name remained circled in red. "Does not answer the phone when the roads freeze. Go in person." Outside, sunlight lay clean across Maple Hill. The sky was clear, but the temperature had dropped overnight. A thin skin of ice covered the porch steps and shone over the fields like glass. Owen returned the receiver to its cradle. "This is not my list," he said. Mara lay near the kitchen doorway. The German Shepherd's golden black body curved around Belle. The puppy slept with one front paw over the old brass bell. Owen looked at the note again. Lillian had been dead for 3 months. Whatever system she had built belonged to the past, along with her handwriting, her winter roots, and the habit she had of leaving responsibility where other people could trip over it. He turned away from the board. Behind him, paper rustled. Mara had risen. The shepherd approached the kitchen table, where Owen had spread the old route map. She lowered her muzzle near one of the folded edges and breathed in slowly. Then she moved along a blue-marked line before stopping beside a dark grease stain. Owen watched her. "You don't read maps." Mara lifted her head. He knew better than to turn an animal's behavior into a miracle, simply because the moment felt meaningful. The paper carried old smells. Lillian's hands, vehicle seats, food containers, wood smoke, perhaps Evelyn's house or clothing. Mara was recognizing something familiar, not drawing conclusions. Still, the dog had stood up for this particular piece of paper. Owen folded the map. "One visit," he said. "Then we come back." Belle woke at the sound of the chair scraping. The puppy pushed himself upright, one ear standing and the other folded across his head. When Mara followed Owen toward the mudroom, Belle hurried after her. The young dog reached the door first and sat on Owen's boot. "No." Belle looked up. "You're too small." The puppy placed both paws on the boot, as if improving his argument. Mara glanced between Belle and Owen. Her body tightened when Owen lifted the puppy away from the door. Separating them after the night beneath the oak was not something he intended to do carelessly. He called Ruth Delaney at the veterinary clinic and explained the situation. "Bring Belle here," the veterinarian said. "A few hours will not harm him if Mara knows where he is." She may disagree. Most mothers do. At the clinic, Ruth prepared a quiet recovery space with a low gate instead of a closed metal door. She placed one of Mara's blankets inside and allowed the mother dog to inspect the room before Belle entered. Belle immediately began chewing the corner of the blanket. Mara remained at the gate. Ruth sat beside her without touching. "He'll be warm," she said. "He'll be fed. He'll still be troublesome when you return." The shepherd did not understand the words, but she understood Ruth's steady posture and Belle's scent on the blanket. After several minutes, Mara allowed Owen to guide her toward the exit. She looked back twice. So did he. The road to Evelyn Pike's house climbed through a wooded section east of Bellwether. Snow covered the shoulders, and the tire tracks narrowed where the county plow had turned around. Owen drove with both hands on the wheel, while Mara stood behind the front seat in her temporary harness. The route felt familiar to her. She did not pull or whine. Yet whenever the pickup slowed near a fork, her ears rose before Owen checked the map. Once, she moved toward the left window several seconds before he saw the faded blue mailbox Lillian had marked as a landmark. The dog remembered the journey in smells, turns, engine changes, and patterns of motion. People often thought memory belonged mainly to the mind. Owen had learned otherwise. The body remembered cold rooms, certain voices, footsteps in hallways. Sometimes the body carried a map long after the person had stopped wanting to travel it. Evelyn Pike's house stood at the far end of a narrow lane beneath tall pine trees. It was a small white home with dark green shutters and a covered front porch. Smoke rose from the chimney. A woman was standing on the porch with a steel shovel. She was small, perhaps 5'4", but her posture added an inch or two. White hair framed her face in a neat bob. A long green wool coat hung over a teal sweater, and a burgundy scarf was wrapped once around her neck. At 78, Evelyn Pike looked less like someone waiting to be rescued and more like someone prepared to send rescue away. She drove the shovel beneath a thin layer of ice and struck the porch boards with a hard crack. Owen stopped the truck. Evelyn looked up. Her expression did not improve when she saw him. "Mrs. Pike? I have been Mrs. Pike longer than you have been worrying strangers." Owen stepped out. "My name is Owen Carver. I know who you are." That surprised him. Evelyn planted the shovel upright. "Bellwether still has telephones, Mr. Carver, even when mine refuses to cooperate." Mara climbed down from the pickup and stood beside him. Evelyn's face softened for one brief second when she saw the dog. "Mara." The shepherd's ears lifted. Owen noticed. "You know her. Your sister brought her here twice a month for 4 years. Evelyn looked back at him. "That does not explain why you are standing in my drive with enough supplies to suggest I have become a weather emergency." Owen opened the truck bed. "I called 3 times. The line freezes when the wind comes from the ridge. Lillian left instructions to check on you. Lillian also knew how to knock before reorganizing a person's life." Owen lifted a small crate of food and set it on the porch. Then he carried over a bundle of split firewood. Evelyn watched him without offering thanks. He studied the house. The steps were slick. The woodpile beside the wall had dropped low. Through the open door, he could hear the uneven rattle of an old heating unit. "When was that furnace serviced?" Evelyn's eyebrows rose. "I do not recall inviting it into the conversation." Owen crossed the porch and looked toward the vent. The heater gave another rough, metallic shudder. "That sound isn't right." "It has made that sound since the first Bush administration. That doesn't make it safe." Before she could answer, Owen crouched beside the unit and removed the front panel. Dust lined the filter. The belt showed wear. Nothing appeared immediately dangerous, but the machine had been neglected. Behind him, the shovel struck the porch floor. "Put that back." "I'm checking it." "No, you are taking it apart. It needs maintenance. So do most men your age, and I don't see me removing your front panel." Owen looked over his shoulder. Evelyn stood with both hands resting on the shovel handle. Her pale green eyes were sharp above the burgundy scarf. "This isn't about pride," he said. "People always say that shortly before insulting someone's pride. The steps are covered in ice. Your wood is low. The heater is overdue for service. And yet I was alive before you drove up. That is not a plan." Her face hardened. "No, it is a fact." Owen replaced the furnace panel, but his frustration had already found its voice. "Safety matters more than pretending you don't need help." The words landed between them. Evelyn's hands tightened around the shovel. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" "I think you're 78 years old, alone at the end of a road the county barely plows. And I think you are a man who has been here one morning and already believes he understands my life." Mara moved away from Owen. The shepherd climbed the first porch step and stopped near Evelyn, leaving several feet between them. Owen reached for the harness. "Mara!" The dog did not return. She sat. Not against Evelyn. Not in front of her. Simply near enough to share the porch. Evelyn looked down at her. "Well," she said quietly, "at least one of you remembers how to visit." The anger in Owen did not disappear. It changed shape. He looked at the woman, the shovel, the thin wood pile, and the dog sitting without asking anything from her. He had entered houses in dangerous places where hesitation could cost lives. In those rooms, decisiveness had been mercy. He had learned to identify risk, remove choices, and move people before fear could argue. But Evelyn's porch was not one of those rooms. The old woman was not an obstacle between Owen and the correct decision. She was the person who had to live with it. Mara lowered herself to the boards. Her harness rested loose across her chest. Evelyn slowly reached down and placed one hand on the shepherd's shoulder. Mara did not lean closer, but she did not move away. Evelyn's voice lost some of its edge. "I do not object to firewood." Owen waited. "I object to becoming a report." "I didn't bring a report." "You brought the face of one." He almost smiled, but the moment did not allow it. Evelyn kept her hand on Mara. "After my husband died, people started lowering their voices around me. Then they began finishing my sentences. Last year, a nephew I see twice at Christmas suggested I should leave this house because I slipped on a rug. Did you?" "Of course I slipped. Rugs are treacherous." Owen glanced at the icy steps. She noticed. That was outside. Different enemy. A brief silence passed. Then Evelyn said, "I'm not afraid of help, Mr. Carver. I am afraid of what some people do after they decide you need it." "What do they do?" "They stop asking." The answer was simple enough to fit in one breath. It carried years. Owen looked toward the truck, where the supplies remained stacked according to his judgment of what she required. He had come to make the house safer. He had not asked whether Evelyn wanted him inside it. There were many ways to take something from a person. Money, property, time. Dignity was often taken more politely. Sometimes it disappeared beneath helpful hands. Owen removed his gloves. "I was wrong." Evelyn studied him as though checking the workmanship of the apology. That sounded painful. It was manageable. Then perhaps there is hope. He lifted the firewood bundle again. "How much would you like?" Evelyn considered the pile. "Half." "You need more than half." Her eyes narrowed. Owen stopped himself. "Half," he said. "And leave the food crate. I will pay for it." It was already in Lillian's pantry. "Then I will repay the next person." That sentence made him pause. Evelyn nodded toward the kitchen. "There are 3 people I used to call every morning. Your sister brought me wood. I made certain those 3 answered their telephones. That was the arrangement." "What happened?" "Lillian died. Miles tried to keep the deliveries moving. Then the calls became irregular. People began assuming someone else was checking." She looked toward Mara. A circle breaks quietly. One person misses a morning. Another assumes it has been handled. Soon, everyone is waiting, and no one knows for whom. Owen placed half the wood beside her door. "Would you call them again?" "If you stop arriving at their houses like a federal inspection." "I wasn't that bad." Evelyn gave him a long look. Mara's tail tapped the porch once. Owen accepted the verdict. "All right. I was that bad." Evelyn's mouth softened. "I will make the calls." On the drive back to Bellwether, Owen stopped at the clinic to collect Belle. The puppy greeted Mara with such enthusiasm that he rolled over his own feet and landed beneath her chest. Mara inspected him from nose to tail. Ruth handed Owen a small paper bag of food. "You found Evelyn alive?" "Yes." "Did she let you help?" "Eventually." "That was not my question." Owen looked at her. Ruth folded her glasses. 3 people called this morning after hearing Lillian's brother was checking houses. What did they want? To make it clear, they did not require supervision. I wasn't supervising. One woman said you arrived with a military vehicle. It is an old pickup. She said it was driven with military intent. Owen exhaled. Ruth's expression remained neutral. They are afraid that accepting help will become proof they should not be living alone. I'm not trying to remove anyone. They don't know that. The drive back to Maple Hill was quieter. Belle slept against Mara in the rear seat. Owen passed the oak where he had found them, then continued toward the house. He had spent the morning trying to reopen one door. By afternoon, he had learned that several others were beginning to close. Inside the house, Owen carried the food into the pantry. Mara settled near the stove, while Belle wandered into the kitchen, dragging the brass bell by its cord. The puppy disappeared beneath the table. A moment later, Owen heard papers shifting. Belle. No response. He crouched and found the young dog lying beneath the corkboard. Beside his paws was an old answering machine connected to the kitchen telephone. Dust covered the buttons, but a small red light still blinked. One saved message. Owen stared at it. A strip of masking tape had been placed beneath the machine. In Lillian's handwriting were 2 words. For Owen. Belle rested his chin beside the flashing light. Owen reached toward the play button, then stopped. Some messages waited because no one had been ready to hear them. Until now. Owen pressed the play button at 7 the next morning. The old answering machine clicked, released a breath of static, and then Lillian Carver's voice entered the kitchen. It was not the voice of a dying woman. There was no dramatic farewell, no trembling confession. She sounded tired, mildly annoyed, and entirely like herself. Owen, I don't know when you'll hear this. Maybe you won't. A cupboard door closed somewhere in the recording. You spent most of your life learning what to do when everything became dangerous. I hope someday you learn how to stay when no one is giving orders. The message ended. Owen stood beside the kitchen table with one hand resting on the machine. Mara lay near the stove. Belle was chewing the loose end of a rug until the mother dog placed one paw over it and ended the discussion. Owen played the message again. Lillian had not asked him to remain in Bellwether. She had not told him to keep the house. She had not named him the next leader of her winter network. She had spoken about staying. Owen heard responsibility. By 9 o'clock, the dining table had disappeared beneath maps, notepads, phone numbers, and old route lists. By noon, he had divided the county into 4 sections. By evening, colored cards covered one wall. Red meant medicine. Blue meant firewood. Green meant food. Yellow meant daily telephone confirmation. He created departure times, vehicle assignments, check-in procedures, and a short form for every household on the list. Each volunteer would record road conditions, supply levels, heating concerns, and whether the resident appeared capable of remaining alone. The last phrase bothered him, so he changed it to, "Additional assistance recommended." That sounded more respectful. It meant nearly the same thing. Owen called everyone whose number still worked. Some agreed because they had loved Lillian. Others agreed because the forecast showed colder weather moving toward Bellwether. One older man asked whether he could repair 2 portable radios from home. Owen checked the assignment sheet. "We need someone on Route 3, he said. "My knees don't do Route 3 anymore." "The radios can wait." There was silence on the line. "All right," the man said. He did not call back. A widow offered to prepare soup for the drivers. Owen told her the group needed help stacking wood at the eastern storage shed. "I don't lift much these days," she said. "Then perhaps we should find you something later." Her name remained on the board, but no task was written beside it. On the first day, the system worked. 3 vehicles left on time. Medicine reached 4 homes. 2 porches received firewood. Every driver checked in within 10 minutes of the assigned hour. Owen stood in Lillian's dining room with a pencil in hand and felt something inside him settle. Order was not coldness, he told himself. Order was how good intentions survived weather. Mara watched from the doorway. Belle slept beneath the table with the brass bell between his front paws. On the second day, one driver arrived 20 minutes late, because he had stayed for coffee with a man who had recently lost his wife. Owen marked the delay. "You missed your next check-in." "I know. The schedule depends on people leaving on time." The man needed to talk. "So does everyone." The driver studied Owen for a moment. "Lillian used to say coffee counted as a delivery. Lillian is not running this now." Owen regretted the sentence as soon as it left him. The driver looked toward Lillian's empty chair. "No," he said. "She isn't." The next morning, he returned his route card. By the third day, the dining room was quieter. 2 volunteers stopped answering. Another called to say she would help again after the roads improved. 3 older residents refused the daily confirmation questions. One woman said she would rather manage without firewood than explain every morning whether she had eaten breakfast. Owen shortened the form. The refusals continued. He stood before the wall of colored cards and tried to find the flaw. The routes were efficient. The supply counts were accurate. No delivery had been missed. Yet the room felt less alive each day. Ruth Delaney arrived shortly before lunch, carrying a paper bag of dog food and wearing her blue-gray field coat over dark work clothes. Snow had melted along the shoulders. Belle ran toward her, then stopped halfway to check Mara's reaction. When Mara remained calm, the puppy continued and placed both paws against Ruth's boot. Ruth lifted the bag higher. "Your manners remained theoretical." Belle sat. The veterinarian looked at the wall. "What is this?" "A working system." She'd moved closer. Names, times, conditions, vehicle numbers, supply categories, and checkboxes covered nearly every open space. Ruth read one card. Evelyn Pike, firewood delivery, daily wellness confirmation. She agreed to make calls. "That is not written here. It is on another sheet." Ruth found the other sheet. Evelyn's name appeared under call recipients, not volunteers. Ruth turned toward Owen. "You delivered the wood." "Yes." "And removed the part where she helps." "I didn't remove it. I separated responsibilities into people who give and people who receive. That makes tracking easier." "For whom?" Owen set his pencil down. "You came here to criticize my filing system?" "I came because 4 people called the clinic to ask whether accepting supplies from you would create a record against them." "That is not what this is." Ruth gestured toward the wall. "It looks like what it is. A plan." "No. It is a list of what people lack." Her voice was calm, but it left no space for him to dismiss the point. "You have rebuilt the roots," she continued. "You are also removing the reason people once wanted to be part of them." Owen looked at the cards. They need heat, medicine, food. They also need to know they are not useless. No one said they were. You do not have to say it. Sometimes all it takes is assigning every meaningful task to someone stronger. Belle tugged the brass bell from beneath the table. It rang once. Mara raised her head. Ruth looked toward the dogs. "Come with me." "Where?" "To see the man who left Mara under that oak." Owen's expression hardened. "Miles is still recovering." "Yes." "Then he doesn't need me walking into his room with the dog." "That decision should not belong only to you." An hour later, they entered the rehabilitation center outside Bellwether. Miles Fenner was in a therapy room, seated in a wheelchair beside a set of parallel bars. At 68, he had the broad hands and weathered face of a man who had spent much of his life behind a steering wheel and under open skies. His white hair had thinned across the top, and one side of his mouth still moved more slowly than the other. A therapist stood nearby while Miles practiced lifting his right foot. He saw Ruth first. Then he saw Mara. His hand stopped gripping the chair. Mara stopped too. The shepherd did not run toward him. She did not retreat. Her golden black body went still, ears forward, eyes fixed on the man she remembered. Miles lowered his gaze. "I was coming back," he said. The words were slow but clear. No one answered for him. He tried again. I thought, 10 minutes. Mara moved one step closer. Then she sat. Several feet remained between them. Miles pressed his lips together. His eyes filled, but he did not reach out. I'm sorry, girl. Mara watched him. There was no performance of forgiveness, no sudden wagging tail. A dog could remember affection and fear at the same time. Living creatures were allowed more than one truth. Belle stayed behind Mara's hind leg. The puppy had never known Miles's safety. He knew only the mother's caution. Then Belle noticed the brass bell hanging from Owen's hand. He took the cord in his mouth. Owen almost stopped him. Instead, he let it go. Belle dragged the bell across the therapy floor. The metal gave a soft, uneven chime with each step. The puppy reached Miles's wheelchair and dropped the cord beside one of his shoes. Miles covered his face with one hand. I thought I had time, he whispered. Owen had heard those words from many people in many forms. Time to return. Time to apologize. Time to repair what had been left unfinished. People rarely understood how small a life-changing delay could look at the beginning. A woman standing beside the window spoke for the first time. Guilt is useful for about 15 minutes. Owen turned. Nora Whitcomb was 64, solidly built, with short, silver-black hair tucked behind her ears and a pair of rectangular glasses in one hand. A red marking pen was clipped to the pocket of her dark burgundy shirt. She had worked as an emergency medical responder for more than 30 years before retiring. Ruth introduced her as one of the people who had helped Lillian create the winter safety procedures. Miles lowered his hand. Nora continued. After 15 minutes, guilt either becomes responsibility or vanity. That seems generous, Owen said. It is more generous than letting a man spend the rest of his life staring at one bad morning. Miles looked toward Mara. The dog remained seated. Belle had begun chewing the cord he had just delivered. Owen retrieved it before the puppy damaged the bell. Nora nodded toward the folder under his arm. Ruth had insisted he bring the route plan. Show me what you built. They moved to a small family room across the hall. Owen spread his charts across a table. Nora read in silence. Efficient, she said. Thank you. That was not praise. She pointed to the column of names. Who repairs radios? Owen found the man he had tried to assign to Route 3. He withdrew. Because he cannot drive the route? He said his knees were bad. But he can repair radios. Yes. Who makes soup? Owen hesitated. Nora tapped the empty task line beside the widow's name. Who calls people before breakfast? Evelyn. Not according to this. Owen looked at the chart again. Nora took the red pen from her pocket and drew a vertical line through the center of the paper. You turned a circle into this. She pointed to the top. You. Then to the names below. Everyone else waiting to be useful in the way you approve. That is not what I intended. Intent is the story we tell ourselves before consequences arrive. Miles had followed them in his wheelchair. He spoke slowly from the doorway. Lillian brought Evelyn wood. He paused to steady his breath. Evelyn called 3 people. Another pause. Wesley fixed radios. Mrs. Cole made soup. I drove. He looked down at his weakened right hand. Sometimes. They fed me. Owen said nothing. Miles continued. Nobody was only helped. The sentence settled over the table. That was the part Owen had missed. The network had not survived because Lillian was strong enough to carry everyone. It had survived because she made room for each person to carry something. Perhaps that was how God designed communities, not as ladders with the strongest at the top, but as tables where every hand could bring one small offering. Bread, firewood, a telephone call, a repaired radio. Even the willingness to admit that help was needed. After Lillian died, Bellwether had not simply lost a coordinator, it had lost the place where people remembered their usefulness. Nora closed the folder. I left after your sister died, because everyone kept asking me to become Lillian. Why didn't you? Because one person should never be the whole bridge. She looked toward Miles. When one support fails, the rest should still hold. Outside the rehabilitation center, the afternoon sky had turned the color of dull steel. Owen loaded Mara and Belle into the pickup. Before closing the door, he glanced back through the glass entrance. Miles was watching from his wheelchair. Mara looked at him for several seconds. Then she lowered her head and settled beside Belle. Not everything had been repaired, but nothing had been denied. Back at Maple Hill, Owen stood alone in the dining room. The colored cards covered the wall in perfect rows. He removed Evelyn's first, then the radio repairman's, then the widow's blank assignment. One by one, Owen took down every chart, every category, and every form that separated those who gave from those who received. Belle chased the falling papers. Mara lay beneath Lillian's chair and watched. When the wall was empty, Owen found the original route map and placed it in the center. The weather radio on the kitchen counter interrupted the silence. A calm, mechanical voice warned of freezing rain expected in 4 days. Ice accumulation could make rural roads difficult or impassable. Owen looked at the empty wall. For most of his adult life, uncertainty had meant he needed a better plan. Now he understood that a plan built without trust would fail before the storm arrived. 4 days remained. For the first time since coming back to Bellwether, Owen did not know what to do next. And for the first time, he suspected the answer should not begin with him. Owen Carver returned to Evelyn Pike's house the next morning without a clipboard. He brought no inspection form, no schedule, and no opinion about the condition of her furnace. He carried only a small paper bag containing the half loaf of bread she had sent home with him 2 days earlier. Evelyn opened the door before he knocked. "You are early," she said. "I was told older people wake before sunrise. I was told former Navy men understood reconnaissance. You have been misinformed." Mara stood beside Owen in her green harness. Belle waited in the pickup with the window lowered slightly, making small, offended noises because he had not been invited onto the porch. Owen held out the bread. "You gave me this. I know what bread looks like. I came to ask you something." Evelyn studied him over the top of her glasses. "No tools? No. No list? No. That must be uncomfortable. It has been a difficult morning." She opened the door wider. Inside, the old furnace still rattled, but Owen did not look toward it. Evelyn noticed. Her mouth moved slightly. "What is the question?" Owen took a breath. "What can you do for the next person?" The woman's expression changed, not softened. Evelyn Pike did very little by softening, but the suspicion left her eyes. "I can call people," she said. "I know who sleeps late, who pretends not to hear, and who says everything is fine when it is not." "How many?" "Start with 6. I thought it was 3. "I have reconsidered your administrative limitations." Owen nodded. 6? And I will need the old contact book from Lillian's house, not a copied version. Her notes are useful." "That can be arranged." Evelyn looked toward Mara. The shepherd had settled near the porch steps, calm but alert. Belle had managed to place both front paws on the open truck window. "And bring the little one inside before he discovers gravity," Evelyn said. That became the first agreement in the new system. Owen stopped calling it a system. Over the next 2 days, he visited the people whose names remained on Lillian's map. At each house, he asked the same question. Not, "What do you need?" Not, "Are you safe?" He asked, "What can you do for the next person?" The answers were rarely what he expected. A man whose knees no longer allowed him to drive mountain roads could repair radios at his kitchen table. He tested batteries, cleaned the contacts, and labeled every unit in large black letters. A widow who could not stack firewood still made 3 gallons of vegetable soup and filled a row of clean jars. She instructed Owen to return the empty containers because charity, in her opinion, did not excuse stealing glassware. Another resident offered to mend torn blankets. A retired mechanic agreed to inspect portable generators. 2 others, living near the southern road, promised to keep their own quarter-mile clear when the snow arrived. No one was assigned a rank. No one was placed beneath a category called recipient. At the house on Maple Hill, Owen removed the last of his colored cards and replaced them with 2 large sheets of plain paper. At the top of the first, he wrote, "What I need," at the top of the second, "What I can give." The first entries were cautious: heating oil, a ride to the pharmacy, help lifting a bag of dog food. The second sheet took longer. Then Evelyn wrote, 6 morning telephone calls, 7 if Owen behaves. Someone added, radio repair. No stairs. Another person wrote, soup, provided jars are returned. By the end of the day, the second sheet contained more writing than the first. Owen stood before the wall, reading each line. He had spent years believing strong people were those who needed the least. Bellwether was teaching him something less dramatic and more difficult. Strength was not the absence of need. Strength was the willingness to place what you had beside what someone else lacked. Perhaps that was why churches passed a plate from hand to hand. God could have filled it without them. The passing mattered because it reminded every person that even a small offering belonged in the work. Nora Whitcomb arrived that afternoon carrying a Navy medical bag and the expression of someone prepared to reject nonsense before it was spoken. "I have conditions," the retired emergency responder said. "I expected no fewer than 12. 4. That feels merciful. It is temporary." Nora placed the bag on the dining table. Her short, silver-black hair was still damp from melting snow. A red marking pen remained clipped to her burgundy shirt pocket. "First, if someone falls and may have injured the head, neck, back, or hip, nobody moves them without proper assessment." Owen nodded. "Second, warmth does not mean placing a person directly against a hot stove." "Understood." "Third, no one without medical training improvises medical care because they watched a television program in 1998. Owen looked toward the kitchen. "Who did that?" "Half the county." "And the 4th? Nora met his eyes. "You do not overrule me at a medical scene." The room held still for a moment. Chapter 4's version of Owen might have argued about command, risk, and responsibility. This Owen said, "Agreed." Nora watched him long enough to decide whether the answer was real. Then she opened the bag. Inside were thermal blankets, a blood pressure cuff, splints, flashlights, gloves, and clearly labeled packets. She showed Owen what could be handed to her, what should remain sealed, and what information County Dispatch would require. Ruth Delaney took responsibility for animal needs. The veterinarian prepared bags of pet food, basic supplies, and a short list of households where an elderly resident might refuse help if accepting it meant leaving a dog or cat behind. "People do not always stay in unsafe homes because they are stubborn," Ruth said. "Sometimes they stay because no one has explained what happens to the animal." Owen added a new line to the wall. "Pet plan." Ruth crossed out the word plan and wrote, "Who keeps them together? That is clearer," she said. The pickup needed attention as well. Lillian's old 4-wheel drive truck was dependable, but dependable was not the same as prepared. A mechanic fitted winter tires and checked the battery. Owen added tire chains, reflective triangles, a tow strap, blankets, water, a shovel, and a small radio. Nora made him practice contacting County Dispatch from 3 different roads. She also required him to mark safe places where the truck could turn around. "You cannot help someone if you bury the only useful vehicle in a ditch," she said. "I have driven in worse conditions." That sentence is how vehicles end up in ditches. Miles Fenner participated from the rehabilitation center. The older driver still used a wheelchair for longer distances, and his speech slowed when he became tired, but his knowledge of the roads had lost nothing. Every afternoon, Owen called him over the radio. Miles identified slopes where ice formed first, bridges that looked clear when they were not, and houses whose driveways could not support a heavy vehicle. "North Road," Miles said during one check. "Past the white barn. Do not turn in nose first." "Why?" "No room." "How did Lillian manage?" A pause came through the static. "She listened when I told her." Owen looked at Nora. Nora smiled without kindness. "Write it down." He did. Mara began accompanying Owen on the shorter visits. The shepherd seemed comfortable around older adults. She did not push for affection. She entered slowly, chose a place where she could see the room, and waited. People who had resisted Owen's questions often spoke more freely while looking at the dog. At one house, a metal chain slid from the back of a truck. The sound was brief. Mara stopped so suddenly that the loose harness tightened across her chest. Her ears flattened. Every muscle along her back became rigid. Owen felt the old instinct rise in him. Move her forward. Show her there was no danger. Complete the visit. Instead, he stopped. He lowered his hand, but did not touch her. The man near the truck noticed and lifted the chain from the ground. He carried it into the shed without comment. For almost a minute, Mara remained still. Belle, waiting near the porch, watched his mother. The puppy started toward her, but Owen held the short lead gently and kept him from crowding her. Mara breathed. Once. Twice. Then she looked at Owen and took a step forward. The choice belonged to her. An older woman standing in the doorway saw everything. "Your sister used to wait like that," she said. "For dogs? For people." Owen looked down at Mara. He had once believed waiting meant failing to act. Now he was beginning to understand that waiting could be an act of respect. Not every delay was weakness. Sometimes it was how a frightened soul was given back ownership of the next step. Belle's contribution was less disciplined. The puppy stole gloves from baskets, slept across the lower corner of the map, and carried pieces of kindling into the kitchen one at a time. No one had asked him to do any of it. Yet people laughed when Belle was present. Conversations became less formal. Residents who disliked being questioned about loneliness would tell the puppy exactly how quiet their houses had become. Those same people often ended by asking whether another neighbor needed something. The brass bell remained tied to a cord on the front porch. At first, Belle pulled it whenever a vehicle approached because the engine noise made him uncertain. The bell would ring. Mara would lift her head. Belle would run back to his mother. By the second day, something changed. A truck arrived carrying repaired radios. Belle rang the bell, then ran toward the door instead of away from it. Another vehicle brought jars of soup. The puppy rang it again, and wagged so hard that his hindquarters moved sideways. Soon the sound no longer meant fear. It meant someone had come. Owen hung a wooden rack inside the barn. Above it, he placed a handwritten sign. For the next person. Anyone who received firewood could leave one piece if able. Anyone who could not leave wood might bring a jar, batteries, a phone call, a repaired tool, or a promise to check one road. No payment was required. The point was not equal exchange. The point was that everyone had a place on both sides of the door. On the final afternoon before the storm, the barn began to fill. One split log, 2 jars of soup, a folded blanket with careful new stitching, 4 radio batteries, a note promising to clear snow from a southern driveway. Miles sent a road map marked in blue pencil. Evelyn delivered her contact book and a loaf of bread, then took back 2 empty soup jars that did not belong to her. Owen stood in the barn as people came and went. No one waited for his permission. No one asked where they ranked. For the first time since he had returned to Bellwether, the work continued even when he stepped aside. The weather changed just before dark. A fine rain began to fall over Maple Hill. It froze where it touched the porch railing, leaving a thin, clear shell over the wood. The trees clicked softly as ice gathered along their branches. Inside the house, Evelyn sat at the kitchen table with Lillian's contact book and the telephone. Mara rested near the stove. Belle lay beneath the hanging cord of the brass bell, exhausted from greeting visitors. Evelyn completed one call, then another. She made a small mark beside each name. On the 6th call, her expression tightened. She dialed again. Everyone in the kitchen listened to the ringing. No one answered. Evelyn lowered the receiver, waited 10 seconds, and tried a 3rd time. The line rang into an empty house somewhere along the northern forest road. "Who is it?" Owen asked. Evelyn looked down at the name. "Wesley Grant, 79. Widower. Lives alone beyond the north woods." Outside, the freezing rain touched the brass bell. It gave one faint note without anyone pulling the cord. Evelyn closed the contact book. "Wesley always answers." Freezing rain began tapping against the windows just after 7 that evening. At first, the sound was gentle, almost peaceful. Then the temperature dropped another degree, and every drop began to stay where it landed. Ice formed along the porch rail. It glazed the bare branches outside the kitchen. The old maple beside the barn gave a low wooden creak as its limbs took on more weight. Inside the house on Maple Hill, Evelyn Pike held the telephone receiver against one ear. "Wesley Grant," she said again. No one answered. The kitchen had become the center of the winter network, without anyone formally naming it so. The original route map lay open across the table. Beside it sat 2 radios, Lillian's contact book, a lantern, and a pot of coffee that had already been reheated once. Owen Carver stood near the window, watching ice gather on the pickup. "How many times?" he asked. 4. Could his line be down? It could. Evelyn lowered the receiver. But Wesley always answers. The 79-year-old widower lived alone beyond the north woods, where the county road narrowed between a ridge and a frozen creek. He had once repaired radios for half the families on Lillian's winter list. Even after his hands became stiff with age, he could still hear a weak connection in a machine before anyone else knew something was wrong. He also kept his telephone beside his chair. Evelyn knew that because she had called him nearly every morning for years. The lights flickered. Belle lifted his head from beside the stove. Mara was already standing. The adult German shepherd looked from Owen to the route map. Her body was stronger than it had been beneath the oak, but the nervous energy returned to her quickly when wind struck the house or ice cracked against the roof. Owen reached for his jacket. Nora Whitcomb caught the movement from across the table. "First, we call the county." "I know." "Then do it before you start looking like a man about to ignore instructions." The retired emergency responder had arrived before dark with her Navy medical bag and 2 thermal blankets. She wore a dark winter coat over a black thermal shirt, waterproof trousers, and boots made for icy ground. Her short silver-black hair was tucked beneath a wool cap. The red marking pen remained clipped inside her coat, as if even a storm might require correction. Owen contacted County Dispatch by radio. The reply came through static. A 2-vehicle collision had blocked part of the main grade south of Bellwether. County crews were working the scene, and the nearest medical unit could not reach the North Road immediately. "Estimated delay?" Nora asked. The dispatcher could not promise one. Nora took the radio. "We are conducting a welfare check only. We have 1 trained emergency responder. We will not transport unless the situation becomes immediately life-threatening, and no county option is available. Owen looked at her. She covered the microphone. That statement was for you. I heard it. Good. I enjoy repeating myself less than people assume. Evelyn opened Lillian's old contact book. Miles needs to know. Owen called the rehabilitation center. A nurse transferred the radio connection to Miles Fenner's room. The older driver's voice arrived slowly but clearly. North Road? Yes, Owen said. Wesley isn't answering. Miles paused. Do not use the creek bend. Why? Ice first. Always. He told Owen to take the higher lumber road, turn near the white barn, and avoid a narrow bridge hidden by the rise. He also named 2 places where the pickup could safely turn around. Owen marked each point. A week earlier, he might have thanked Miles and then chosen the route himself. Tonight, he wrote down every word. Ruth Delaney had come up from the veterinary clinic to help with the dogs and the people waiting at Maple Hill. When Owen carried Nora's medical bag toward the mudroom, Mara followed immediately. Belle hurried after her. You stay, Owen told the puppy. Belle made a sharp, unhappy sound and pressed against Mara's side. Owen lifted the puppy gently. Mara turned so quickly that the loose harness shifted across her chest. She followed his hands, then looked toward the door, then back at Belle. Outside, a branch snapped under the weight of ice. Mara flinched. Belle struggled once in Owen's arms, trying to reach his mother. Ruth watched both dogs. Separating them tonight may create more trouble than taking him properly secured. He's too young to be loose in the truck. He will not be loose. Ruth brought in the hard-sided travel crate they had prepared earlier. She placed Mara's blanket inside, then fastened the crate securely in the rear cabin of the pickup. Belle could see and smell his mother through the door. Mara inspected every side of the crate. Belle touched his nose to the opening. Only when the puppy settled did Mara step back. Ruth looked at Owen. The crate stays closed while the vehicle is moving. Belle comes out only after you stop, and Nora declares the location safe. Understood. Owen had spent years moving toward danger with less equipment and fewer questions. Tonight, he checked the crate latch twice. Perhaps wisdom was not becoming less brave. Perhaps it was finally understanding how many lives courage could endanger when it refused to accept limits. Nora climbed into the passenger seat. Mara took the rear floor behind her, secured by the green harness. Belle lay inside the fixed crate. Evelyn remained at Maple Hill to manage the telephone and the base radio. Ruth stayed with her. No disappearing from the radio, Evelyn warned. I wasn't planning to. You plan many things badly. Owen closed the door before she could improve the sentence. The pickup moved down Maple Hill at little more than walking speed. Ice shone across the road beneath the headlights. The windshield wipers pushed aside freezing rain, only for a new film to form seconds later. At the first junction, 2 local volunteers had placed reflective triangles along the safer turn. They stood well away from the road, clearing one fallen branch with a handsaw. Owen stopped long enough to lower the window. Nothing bigger than you can move safely, he said. One man nodded. We heard Nora. Then listened to her. Nora looked at Owen after the truck moved again. That almost sounded like personal growth. Do not document it. The higher road was rough but passable. Miles checked in every 10 minutes. Evelyn relayed updates from the county. No one filled the radio with unnecessary talk. Each person carried one part of the night. That made the silence between messages feel less empty. Wesley's house appeared after 9 o'clock, a low gray structure at the edge of the north woods. The porch light was off. One downstairs window showed a faint yellow glow, but the rest of the house stood dark beneath the ice-coated trees. Owen parked facing the road for a clear departure. Nora noticed. Miles told you. He usually knows the road. He usually does. They left Belle secured in the truck, Mara stepped down carefully, her boots finding rough patches beneath the ice. Owen called from the porch, "Mr. Grant! Wesley!" No answer came. He tried the front door. A thick ridge of ice had sealed the lower edge. The frame would not move without force. Mara smelled the threshold, then turned away. The dog did not rush into the dark or pull them toward a hidden answer. She moved slowly along the side of the house, pausing to inspect old tracks and places where familiar human scent remained protected beneath the eaves. "She's been here before," Nora said. "With Lillian." Mara continued towards the rear. A narrow path ran beside a small greenhouse attached to the house. The overhanging roof had kept part of the doorway from freezing shut. Mara stopped there. Owen tried the handle. Unlocked. He opened the door and called again. A weak voice answered from somewhere inside. "Back here." Nora entered first, after Owen confirmed there was no immediate hazard. Mara remained near the doorway until Owen guided her inside. They found Wesley Grant beside a small storage room near the rear of the house. The older man sat partly against the wall, one leg extended. He wore a red plaid shirt beneath a brown cardigan. His gray hair had fallen across his forehead, and his broad face had gone pale with cold. A small fuel container lay several feet away. "I was bringing it in," Wesley said. "Floor won the argument." Nora knelt beside him. "How long have you been down?" "Long enough to reconsider the floor." "Did you lose consciousness?" "No." "Hit your head?" "Don't believe so." "Belief is not an assessment." She began checking him with calm, efficient movements. Wesley remained alert. He could move his toes, but his ankle was already swelling, and he could not stand safely. The heating system had weakened because the fuel supply was low. The house was cold, though not yet dangerously so. Owen brought in the thermal blankets and followed Nora's directions. "Blanket beneath the shoulders," she said. "Not under the injured leg. Slow." He obeyed. No argument. No improvisation. While Nora stabilized Wesley's ankle, Owen contacted Evelyn. "We found him, awake and speaking. Possible ankle injury. Cold exposure, but stable." The relief in Evelyn's silence lasted 1 second. Then she returned to work. "I'll notify Miles and County Dispatch." Wesley looked at Owen. "All this because I missed a call?" "Because Evelyn noticed you missed it. I've caused trouble." "No. I should have waited for someone to bring the fuel." "Probably." Wesley gave him a tired look. "You comfort people like a fence post. I've been told worse." The old man tried to shift and winced. Nora placed one hand near his knee. "Do not move." "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Age has finally taught someone something." Mara had settled several feet away. She watched Nora's hands but remained calm. From the truck came one muffled bark. Mara's ears turned toward the sound. Belle barked again. The mother dog rose, took 2 steps toward the door, then looked back at Wesley. Her concentration was divided. The house was secure. The fuel container had been moved aside. Nora had completed her initial examination, and the vehicle stood still outside. Owen asked, "Can Belle come in?" Nora looked around the room. "Short-lead. Keep him away from the medical equipment." Owen brought the puppy from the crate. Belle rushed to Mara first, pressing his nose beneath her chest. Mara inspected him quickly from head to tail. Only then did Belle notice Wesley. The puppy approached in uneven steps. Owen kept the lead short enough to prevent jumping. Belle lay down beside Mara, near the older man's boots. Wesley looked at the 2 dogs. "That the pup?" "Yes." Lillian would have liked him. "He steals gloves." She liked thieves with honest faces. Belle rested his chin on the floor. Wesley's breathing slowed. The dogs did not treat him. They did not understand his injury or summon help through impossible instinct. They simply changed the room. Fear had less space when another living creature was willing to rest beside it. Wesley looked away. "I fixed every radio on this road," he said. "Now people have to come lift me off my own floor." Owen adjusted the thermal blanket. "Those radios helped them reach us tonight. That was years ago. The signal still carried." Wesley studied him. "You do not owe the same person forever," Owen said. "You leave something where it can be found. Tonight, it came back." The old man's eyes closed briefly. "Sounds like something your sister would say." "No, she would have said it better." The radio crackled. Miles had identified a passable approach for the county rescue vehicle. The volunteers farther down the road had moved another branch and placed lanterns at the turn. A warming room had been opened near the white barn in case the crew needed to stop. No single person had solved the problem. That was why the plan was working. The county vehicle arrived 40 minutes later. It was a four-wheel drive medical unit equipped for winter roads. The crew entered with a proper stretcher and lifting equipment. Nora gave a concise report. Wesley was secured, kept warm, and moved without placing unnecessary weight on the injured ankle. Before leaving, he pointed toward a shelf near the wall. "Radio parts." Owen followed his gaze. "Leave them. Take the blue case. Miles will know." Even while being carried from his house, Wesley needed to know he still had something to give. Owen picked up the case. "I'll bring it to him." Wesley nodded. The medical vehicle transported him directly to the regional clinic. No transfers between civilian trucks. No improvised ride through the storm. On the return journey, freezing rain still struck the windshield, but the road no longer felt like a line Owen alone had to hold. Evelyn had heard the silence. Miles had remembered the safe road. Nora had protected Wesley from well-intentioned mistakes. The volunteers had marked the turns and cleared what they could. Ruth had protected the dog's stability. Mara had recognized a familiar entrance. Belle had helped the frightened room become quieter. Owen had driven the truck. That was all. It was enough. They reached Maple Hill shortly before dawn. A warm light shone from every downstairs window. As Owen parked, the brass bell on the porch began to ring. Belle was still secured inside the truck. Owen stepped out. A woman carrying a coffee pot stood beneath the porch roof. Behind her came a man with radio batteries. Another vehicle arrived with 2 jars of soup. Someone placed a fresh piece of firewood on the barn rack, marked, "For the next person." The bell rang again as each person reached the door. No one had been called. They had come because they had been waiting for news, and waiting had become its own form of service. Mara stood beside Owen. Belle pressed against her front legs. He looked at the house that he had intended to empty and sell. For the first time, the question was not whether he would stay. The question was how to make certain this place could keep serving people even when no single person remained strong enough to carry it. 4 days after the ice storm, Wesley Grant's voice came through the radio at Maple Hill. "Who touched the blue receiver?" Owen Carver looked up from the dining table. Around him, the room had become crowded with route maps, soup jars, battery boxes, and people who no longer waited for him to tell them where to sit. Evelyn Pike was checking names in Lillian's contact book. Nora Whitcomb was reviewing the medical supply list. Ruth Delaney had placed a bag of dog food beside the pantry. Miles Fenner answered Wesley from the second radio at the rehabilitation center. "I did." "You tightened the rear plate too much." A pause followed. Miles said, "You are in a medical bed with your ankle wrapped. That has not affected my hearing." Evelyn lowered her glasses. "Wesley, the radio works. It works badly. It reached you. That is not a technical standard." Laughter moved through Lillian's dining room. It was not loud. No one had gathered for celebration. Winter still held the roads, and Wesley still faced several weeks of recovery from a severe ankle sprain. But the sound changed the house. For months, every room had carried the silence of someone missing. That morning, the silence finally had to make space for other voices. Mara lay near the stove, her golden black coat cleaner and fuller than it had been beneath the oak. Belle slept across one of her front legs. The puppy had grown taller in a short time, though his feet remained too large for the rest of him. One ear stood proudly. The other leaned sideways whenever he became tired. Wesley continued explaining over the radio how Miles had mishandled the receiver. Miles listened until the older man finished. "Good," he said. "What is good?" "You sound like yourself." The radio became quiet. Then Wesley replied, "Someone has to maintain standards." Owen looked around the table. The Winter Network had survived its first real emergency since Lillian's death. More important, it had survived without becoming Owen's network. Evelyn had noticed Wesley's silence. Miles had found the safe road. Nora had managed the medical response. Ruth had protected the dogs. Volunteers had cleared branches, marked turns, and kept a warming room open. Owen had driven. That was one part among many. For most of his life, being needed had meant standing where the weight was greatest. Now he was beginning to understand that a person could serve by making certain the weight did not gather in one place. That understanding followed him upstairs later that morning. Lillian's bedroom had remained mostly unchanged. A blue quilt covered the bed. A stack of library books sat beside the window. On the dresser stood a photograph of Lillian in her dark teal winter coat, one hand resting on Mara's back. Owen picked up the photograph. Keeping the house because he felt guilty would not honor his sister. Guilt could hold a man in place, but it could not tell him where to build. Selling the property and leaving immediately would be another kind of mistake. The house had become useful again. That did not mean it should become his kingdom. 2 days later, Owen met with an estate attorney in downtown Bellwether. Clara Wynne was 57, with short dark hair streaked silver near one temple, and a calm voice that made every sentence sound as though it had already survived an argument. Her office occupied the second floor above the pharmacy. Shelves of county records lined one wall, while a small electric heater clicked beneath the window. Owen placed Lillian's will and the property papers on Clara's desk. "I want the house and barn used by the Winter Network." "For how long?" "Permanently." Clara removed her glasses. "That is an intention, not a legal structure." "I am the only heir." "You are also the executor. That gives you authority to manage the property while the estate is settled. It does not make every permanent transfer immediate." "How long?" "If we create a nonprofit community trust, complete the filings, establish a board, address insurance, and transfer title correctly." She leaned back. "Longer than the 10 days you plan to remain in town." Owen looked toward the window. Snow lay bright over the courthouse square. People moved along the sidewalk carrying groceries, mail, and ordinary responsibilities. "I'm not asking to control it," he said. "Good. People who say they want to give something away often still want to decide what happens to it forever." He turned back to her. "That is not what I want." Clara studied him. "Then answer one question. What happens when you leave?" The question stayed in the room. Not if he left. When? Owen had returned to Bellwether, assuming departure was the cleanest part of the plan. Now he understood that every system built around one person eventually inherited that person's absence. "Someone else takes my place," he said. Clara shook her head. "That gives you the same problem under a different name." Owen thought of Lillian's dining room, the empty chair, the 3 months during which everyone had waited for someone else to continue her work. "No one takes my place," he said. "The work is divided." Clara put her glasses back on. "That is a better beginning." They drafted a temporary use agreement, allowing the network to operate from the house and barn, while the estate remained under Owen's management. Clara would begin the longer process of forming a community nonprofit and transferring the property after the legal requirements were met. The temporary agreement required several named coordinators, basic insurance, written safety procedures, and clear records. For once, paperwork did not feel like a wall. It felt like a bridge that needed to be built correctly. The first planning meeting took place the following Saturday. There was no stage, no banner, no photograph of Owen at the head of the room. The dining table was crowded with bread, soup, batteries, notebooks, and one plate of cookies Evelyn claimed she had not baked for anyone in particular. Clara attended long enough to explain the temporary agreement. Then she left before anyone could ask her to join a committee. Evelyn accepted responsibility for the call network. "I will require 2 backups," she said, "competent ones." Miles, now able to walk short distances with a frame, would coordinate road reports and radio traffic from his home after leaving rehabilitation. Nora took charge of emergency procedures and safety training. Ruth agreed to maintain the animal support list, including temporary homes for pets if an older resident needed medical care. Owen volunteered for vehicle maintenance, winter driving instruction, repairs, and supply transport. Evelyn looked at him. "Who supervises you?" "The board." "Good." A few people laughed. Owen did too. One man near the end of the table asked why Owen did not simply keep the house. It belonged to his family. He could allow the network to use it while retaining control. Owen looked at Lillian's chair. "My sister did not leave me a throne," he said. "She left an empty place in a circle." The room grew quiet. "If I sit there too long, we have learned nothing." No one applauded. Owen was grateful. Applause could make the right decision sound like one man's achievement. This decision belonged to every person willing to carry a piece of it. Winter slowly loosened its grip on Bellwether. Snow remained in the shaded fields, but sunlight began dripping from the eaves. Roads that had been white turned brown at the center. The mornings still carried deep cold, though the afternoons sometimes smelled faintly of wet earth. Mara recovered on her own terms. No one placed an official working vest on her. No one demanded that she return to search training simply because she remembered routes and trusted older people. Some mornings, Mara rode with Owen to deliver supplies. Other mornings, the sound of metal in the truck bed caused her to stop at the porch. When that happened, Owen waited. If Mara chose to remain home, she remained home. Healing did not owe anyone a performance. A wound could close without becoming a lesson for strangers. Bell continued growing badly. His legs lengthened before he learned what to do with them. He ran across the yard, discovered too late that the ground was slick, and slid into a small pile of firewood. He stole Nora's red marking pen once and carried it beneath the kitchen table. Nora recovered the pen. Bell appeared pleased with the negotiation. The puppy still checked for Mara before moving too far away. He might chase a drifting leaf across the porch or follow a visitor toward the barn, but after several steps, he always turned his head. Mara no longer placed her entire body between Bell and the world. She watched. Sometimes, when they rested near the stove, she laid one front paw lightly across his shoulder. Protection had changed. It was no longer a wall. It had become a quiet reminder that Bell was free to move because someone faithful remained nearby. At the network's first official gathering under the temporary agreement, people arrived without being assigned. One brought soup, another brought folded blankets. Miles arrived with repaired radios. Evelyn brought her contact book and corrected the spelling on 3 new forms before removing her coat. Ruth placed animal food in the pantry. Nora inspected the first aid cabinet and declared it acceptable, which everyone understood to be high praise. Bell waited beside the porch door. When the first pickup entered the drive, he took the bell cord in his mouth and pulled. The brass bell rang across Maple Hill. Mara lifted her head but did not tense. Another vehicle arrived. Bell rang the bell again. The sound carried over the white fields beneath the clear, late winter sun. Once it had warned a frightened puppy that his mother was still alive. Later, it had announced the arrival of help. Now it meant something simpler. The door was open. A final pickup stopped near the barn. The driver climbed out, carrying a wooden crate filled with split firewood. He was not bringing news of an emergency. He had no hidden document and no request for rescue. He walked toward Owen. "Where do you want this?" Owen looked into the barn. The rack still carried the hand-painted words. "For the next person," he pointed. "Put it beside what is already there." The man carried the crate inside. Belle ran after him, then stopped near the doorway and looked back. Mara stood in the yard, sunlight touching the golden patch across her chest. The puppy waited. Mara walked forward, and together, the two dogs entered the barn. Owen remained outside for a moment. He had once thought peace meant reaching a place where no one depended on him. Now he understood that peace was not the absence of responsibility. It was responsibility shared so honestly that no person had to become a hero, and no person had to be only helpless. Perhaps God never asked one pair of hands to hold the whole roof. Perhaps he only asked each person to lift the beam within reach. The bell rang once more behind Owen. Then the house, the barn, the road, the dogs, and the people of Bellwether continued with the ordinary work of keeping one another warm. Sometimes the greatest kindness is not carrying everything for someone, but making sure no one has to carry everything alone. Owen, Mara, and Belle remind us that every person still has something to give. A call, a meal, a piece of wood, or simply the choice to stay. Perhaps that is how God often works, not through one great miracle, but through many ordinary hands answering at the right time. Who has helped carry part of your burden when you needed it most? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories of loyalty, hope, and second chances. May your home know peace, and may you always find an open door when the road grows cold.